Now, the good thing about the Netherlands is that it already is a very strong brand. We can safely say that it occupies a very high place in the ranking of nation brands. There are such things as nation brand rankings, and Netherlands usually does very well. Yet, some people would say in government as well as in the private sector that some of the associations might be somewhat cliché and outdated. So there was this desire to more proactively manage these associations, and this is how the project came along.
Very nice, but now, so these are the things that we think of when we think of a country, the first things we think of, and you say those associations needed to be updated. Now, together with Simon Arnold, who's also an expert, Simon Arnold, I should say, he's an expert in the field, you co-wrote this new positioning strategy. How does that work? Do you
we pulled it out of a big hat.
Yeah?
No, of course not. So we were asked to guide process.
Yeah.
One thing that we usually start with, very important to get an understanding of what a national identity is.
Yeah.
Now, we were lucky that the Holland Branding Steering Group, that was already in existence, some of the people, again, are in the room that were on that steering committee,
Yeah.
already had commissioned a study about the national identity. So we had this as a foundation. And then we had extensive meetings, both with a steering group as well as an advisory group. And there you would have representatives of what we call externally facing agencies. So obviously the embassies, the missions that we have watching us online, hopefully. But also, of course, RVO, the Netherlands Enterprise Agency, now responsible for the brand, the Public Diplomacy Unit in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the missions, the Netherlands Board for Tourism and Conventions, NAFIC, which does the promotion of the Netherlands towards students, international students, Netherlands Foreign Investment Agency, directors of various ministries, representatives of various big sectors in the Dutch economy, the Olympic Committee, Dutch Culture, the Trade Association, and MKB Nederland, VNO-NCW. I'm sure I'm forgetting some people, but so a huge representative group of people representing the Netherlands, and particularly having a stake in how the country positions itself internationally.
Pretty much everyone was involved.
Well, those were big meetings, yeah.
I feel like I missed out on this entire group.
The challenge, of course, is finding consensus.
Yeah.
So therefore, you need an extensive process.
Fantastic. So this is actually a positioning that's proven to be close to our current identity in a way, what we associate with our country as well. And then what? Do you just communicate it and put it into action?
Well, that's a good question, because there's a lot of confusion there again when we talk about, when people think of brand.
Yeah.
And of course, in commercial branding, a lot is to do about naming something and then doing visual identity for it, which is then trademarked. Okay. Now, of course, when we're talking about countries, you're not really trademarking anything because you have a long-established name and historical associations that have been built up. Yeah. So the idea of logos and slogans, even though we see some of it here today, this statement is not really meant as a slogan. It's a sort of a guiding principle in the initiatives that we do. So the idea of logos and slogans, advertising campaigns, is not so much important when we're talking about cities, regions, countries. You might think otherwise, of course, because you just have to watch CNN or BBC World and you'll see incredible India and Malaysia, truly Asia, and what have you. Yeah. So you might think that, no, this is what it's about. But it's never been proven that that really has a big effect. What does have an effect is, as André already said, is to walk the talk. It's through building substance and what we call substance and symbolic actions. So it's projects, it's initiatives, it's government policy, it's collaboration, collaborative initiatives that really make a difference by getting media attention and social media engagement internationally.
Yeah, so it's about everything that we do as a country, but also you just mentioned symbolic actions. Do other countries do this too, symbolic actions as a country?
Yeah, so well-known examples are, for instance, Estonia, of course, a country that has been invaded and occupied so many times over the course of its history that on gaining independence from the Soviet Union, they must have thought, what the hell with borders and lands. So they built, in 20 years' time, they built the most advanced e-state in the world. And having that, they then came up with symbolic actions like e-residency program, where non-European nationals can actually set up a legitimate European business by having an e-residency card and online security system. They can access the national systems in the cloud, the government services, can set up a company, they can buy property, they can open a bank account. You can do all of that without ever visiting Estonia. They received a lot of positive coverage for that, and quite a few, particularly elites, obviously, have made use of that. Then they created what they call data embassies. So instead of hiring IBM and Microsoft to have safe systems, they actually now have backup and processing power in befriended embassies, in countries, their own embassies, but in befriended countries. Yeah. And very clever also, quite a bit of positive coverage they got during COVID, because they came up with the idea of the digital nomad visa. They said, well, people are now working from home, so why not make Estonia your new home, and then you can work from home from Estonia, and here you've got a 1-year digital nomad visa. So those are very clever, those are what we call symbolic actions or imaginative initiative that are real things. Yeah. They exist, people make use of them, but they're also communicative. So, these things are what journalists like, they will write about it. Another example is, of course, Bhutan with the Gross National Happiness and Happiness Summits and Happiness Institute. Again, ideas that have been exported around the world that people might have heard of. So those are the types of things that we're looking at. Yeah, but it does give you a certain image of a country that helps you associate with that place. Yeah, particularly those are countries that, of course, were not on people's radar. Oh. And this is largely different from the Netherlands, which is on most people's radar, as I've already said. So getting that attention, just getting the attention, but also associating it with positive, consistent stories, because they consistently tell a similar story about the country, that's very powerful. Now, let's just say the Netherlands, anyone in this room can come up with a symbolic action. Let's just say, we're going to say, okay, cool, the Netherlands is going to ban single-use plastic. Send a message to the world, that's what the Netherlands stands for. Or we're going to adopt 17 million square meters of Amazon rainforest for every person that lives here. Is that a symbolic action that would work? I like the 70 million square meters of rainforest, but maybe not in the Amazon, but in Indonesia, because that would make it a relevant Dutch symbolic action. The thing is, with symbolic action, you want them to be on strategy, so reinforcing this statement, but also have to be recognizably Dutch. So from here, from the Netherlands, and easier for people to recognize as such. So the single-use plastics idea we'd have to think about how we could make that typically Dutch. I was myself, for instance, thinking of now with the Black Lives Matter movement, the whole diversity issue again now with the UEFA. And of course the fact that Netherlands already had some coverage about this in the past and actually comments from the United Nations. I think we should finally replace the Zwarte Pieten by politicians. Politicians are here to serve your people, so why not have them replace the Zwarte Pieten? But then again, I don't think that children would be very happy with that either, so maybe that's not a good idea after all. But another idea I think that might be interesting to set up to reinstate the VOC, the East India Company, as a crowd-funded fair trade organization. So correcting some of our historical mistakes maybe, and in the process coming up with imaginative, inventive ideas to solve some of the challenges that we currently face in the global value chains. And of course, there's lots of things that we can do in the maritime sector, but we have a speaker here who will join us afterwards. But again, I think when I go around the world and I speak about nation branding and countries, people think of Dubai with the Palm Islands and the World Islands, and the Dutch dredging companies will actually sell those as those were built by us. So instead of saying we're Dutch companies and we've done the Delta Works, no, they go around the world saying, well, we built Palm Island and the World Islands. So I think I'm exaggerating, obviously, but I think there's opportunity there to do much more in terms of symbolic actions, particularly if we would collaborate maybe with the Flemish. The second biggest region for dredging and maritime is Flanders. So a low country's powerhouse of maritime sector that can solve the world's problems. I think that could be very powerful. Now, just before we close off, do you perhaps have one advice for those, if you look forward to what we've seen implemented so far? But perhaps all these matters would probably need a lot of collaboration, if I hear this. But do you have any advice forward from what you've seen so far from the positioning and perhaps what we could do in the future? Well, there's a lot of great stuff, obviously, that has happened. And you go to nlplatform.com, you will see a lot of great examples. But what surprises me, in fact, is that the missionary minister is not here. And I would say, if this is national strategy and this is how the Netherlands wants to position itself in the world, I think the cabinet and the new cabinet, so therefore the formation talks, should really take note and make this part of a coalition agreement, because it should be government policy. So that would be certainly my advice. If it's about solving global challenges together, I think the government should be much more proactive and also maybe take a more proactive, constructive approach to how the Netherlands participates in the European Union, which, if you look at the media, hasn't really got that much positive coverage over the last few years. So, these are things, if we're talking about substance, we've just talked about symbolic actions, but the substance needs to be there. And therefore, I think those are things that need to be considered.
Definitely. Thank you, Robert, so much. We're going to have to move on to the next topic, but thank you so much for your insights. Ladies and gentlemen, Robert Govers.
Thank you.